So can you see me? Hello? Hello? Can you see me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, I can see and hear you. Great.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so now I'll start. So basically, my big thing is that I watched the Last Jedi a couple of times. The first time I watched it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" But then when I actually thought about it, it made zero sense. But then when I watched it for the second time, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this movie just destroys the lore." So here is the first reason why it is. I consider the third worst Star Wars movie lore wise. So I'm guessing you've already seen the movie, right? So 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 basically, what's going on is that is that it's so messed up how they treat Luke Skywalker, because in the previous iterations of the movies, Luke Skywalker would never have bailed out when things went crazy. That's never what he did before. And the other thing was the other lore mess ups was just over the fact that the capital ship ran out of fuel. Mon Calamari capital ships literally never ran out of fuel because of the way the fuel systems ran. It would take extreme incompetence to actually run out of fuel for a Mon Calamari cruiser. And the other thing is the fact that it's the entire casino sequence. Because with the casino sequence, they said they had, when it started, they had only 18 hours left of fuel. But then it turns out that they have, but then it turns out during the movie that it takes several days. And that's a massive problem, is that but also a problem is Snook himself, because Snook is just some guy who doesn't have a link to any Star Wars groups or why he has risen to power in the First Order. He's just some guy. I'll let you go. Get out of time.
Okay, so great. Glad we're both Star Wars fans, right? Spoiler alert for anybody that's watching this debate that hasn't seen the movie. So I've seen the movie multiple times as well. I actually work at a movie theater, so I got to see it even before the public saw it, and I get free movies, so I went to go see it several times and evaluate it. And overall, I think it gets a bunch of unwarranted criticism from fanboys that don't actually assess the Star Wars story correctly. So to get to a few of the points, you talk about Luke Skywalker, and he's a good guy, and he would never leave the resistance or leave his cause like that. And I think when people make this claim, they also relate it to like how he would never murder a young boy or even think about something like that. But I think they're overlooking several parts of his character. If you go back to A New Hope, what does Luke want to do before he beats Obi-Wan? He wants to just get off Tatooine. So much so, he wants to join the Imperial Academy. Right, so he's clearly willing to do whatever it takes and fight for any cause or do anything to get out of a situation that he finds unfavorable. Next, never wanting to kill somebody, because people bring this up where he thought about striking down Ben Solo. He had dark moments in Return of the Jedi, such as when he's having his final duel with Darth Vader. He cuts off Darth Vader's hand, looks at his own hand, and then makes a moral decision whether to strike down Darth Vader or turn around and confront the Emperor as a Jedi. Now, you talk about the capital ship running out of fuel, and it's not elaborated on much. And it's not something we're familiar with. The Star Wars universe is a whole fuel situation, but I think it adds an interesting depth because that's really something that's never discussed that much in the Star Wars universe, such as like fuel or ammo for like stormtrooper blasters or things such as that. So I think it adds a much more realistic dynamic and enriches the lore in that favor. Third, you talk about the Canto Bight sequence. I've seen the movie several times. I never caught an indicator that it took days for them to get DJ and that whole sequence to occur. So to my knowledge, when they arrived on Canto Bight, it was already night, and by the time they leave, it is still night, therefore implying they were there for only a short amount of time. And then lastly, you talk about Snoke himself, and there's a lot of criticism surrounding like Snoke and the mysteriousness of his character, but I say that's not a fair criticism to award yet, first of all, because if you think about how all the Star Wars, the new trilogy, rhymes with the original trilogy, people probably left The Empire Strikes Back wondering who was the Emperor, why does he look that way, who's this guy Darth Vader's talking to. And so not all questions are meant to be answered in the second installment of a trilogy. And so I think for those reasons that The Last Jedi is not third worst Star Wars movie lore wise. It enriches the lore and it doesn't have all of its questions solved, but I think it will make a lot more sense after what they set up with plot points in episode 9. And with that, I'll toss it back to you.
Okay, so you made a couple good points. So the first point you made was the point on. So one of the points you made was on Palpatine and people wondering why he looks like that. But the problem is that they didn't kill off Palpatine in the second movie. While in The Last Jedi, they killed off they killed off Snoke within the first 30 minutes. And that's one of the larger problems is that they created a big bad, but then they didn't utilize big bad. They killed him off within the first half of the movie. Now I know many people will say that it's just a fake out. Snoke isn't really dead. He isn't really dead, but that's not. But what is presented to the audience is the fact that Snoke is dead. They killed off a guy who they're hyping up in the first movie as the next movie villain. Now, you brought up a good point about Luke wanting to join Imperials, but that's not because he wanted. That's not because he just wanted to get out of Tatooine. He wanted to go to Imperial Academy because it was expected for her boys his age to join the Imperial Academy, because it's no different than someone in high school wanting to join the military. It's a similar thing, because that's all that was that Luke was going to be a pilot either way. Now you brought up a point about The Last Jedi, about him wanting to strike down. About second father, because there's a major difference. Because with Luke and Vader, it was a genuine survival situation where we have a guy who was tormenting you for years, and you finally have a chance to strike him down. Here's a guy who kidnapped your sister, cut off your hand, tried to blow up multiple. Tried to blow up your planet. Tried to blow up the planet of the rebels, and finally, I'd like to before I toss it back to you, I would like to point out that during the casino sequence, it's shown that the sun went up and down multiple times. It rose and set multiple times because we learned because at the same time that the Rey was getting topped by Luke. So I'll let you go.
Okay. So a few things here. So the first one, you talk about they killed off Snoke, but they didn't kill off Palpatine. The Empire Strikes Back. I think this is an excellent decision. I'll tell you why. So after The Force Awakens got a lot of criticism to A New Hope. And I imagine that they want to stray away from that, because that was the primary criticism The Force Awakens got, was its similarities. And so by pulling the trick, the Dark Apprentice kills the Master, but Kylo Ren does not redeem himself. He remains evil. That sets up a development for an even greater plot point that we haven't seen in the future, right? Because there's not going to be any Kylo Ren kills Snoke, turns to the good, saves Rey, yada, yada, yada. Kylo Ren killed Snoke, kind of saved Rey, but then remained bad. And so they're going to create a whole new redemption outlet for his character in an upcoming film. That's the only way. And it's going to be something we haven't seen before, once again, enriching the lore. You talk about the social expectation for Luke, and that's why he wanted to join the Imperial Academy, to get, and not just to get off Tatooine. If that was the case, then after he had nothing to go back to, and his Aunt Owen and Uncle Beru died, right? Yeah. Okay, but he would have just gone to the Imperial Academy if it was such a strict social expectation. But instead, he went with Obi-Wan on an adventure, right? Because he said, "There's nothing left here for me." It wasn't some impressive social expectation. It's he wanted to get off Tatooine at any means possible. You could tell that he didn't like his work. Oh, just one more harvest, and you can join the Imperial Academy. He wasn't ashamed of this. He just wanted to leave his farm and his family. You talk about Darth Vader and how it was a survival situation. So first of all, when Luke contemplates this, it is after he has chopped off Vader's hand and he loses his lightsaber. Vader is defeated, right? Vader is absolutely defeated. So that's not a, like in the heat of battle moment. That is after your enemy is defeated and you're choosing whether to execute them or not. And he does contemplate it for multiple seconds. And then once he talks in the movie, he reads into Kylo Ren's mind and he says he finds unbelievable darkness in Kylo Ren's mind, because Snoke has already won him over, is what he believes, correct? And that gives him major threat to once again contemplate something on the same level of killing Darth Vader. Why would you want to kill Darth Vader after he's defeated? Because he's a major threat. Why would you want to kill Ben Solo if he senses bad darkness? Because it would become a major threat. And lastly, we talk about the sons, and that's how you know Canto Bight. So first of all, if I understand you correctly, you say because Rey and Luke, several sons go by. First of all, not all stories are being told in continuity in any Star Wars movie ever. Some of them are ongoing at the same time. Secondly, Ottawa or Canto Bight could have different solar systems. They could have multiple suns. They could have suns closer or farther away that could change the length of their days, not necessarily pairing up to hours, unless we have that exact scientific information. And so with that, I'll pass it back to you after some product placement.
Now, you made it. So I like, very good. But I like to make make a 5-tier counter. So the first part you said was that the main criticism of Force Awakens was that it was a reboot of A New Hope. But it being a reboot doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It's following the New Hope formula made it great because it did what it was supposed to do. It followed a formula that works. It followed up on old characters, introduced new characters, showed off the evil organization. They show evil organization as what they are. As what they are. They are the remnants of the Empire, basically. They're basically the Imperial remnants of what is now the Legends verse. So, verse. And so I'd like to go to my third point. And my third point is to counter your assertion that Luke simply wanted to leave after that. Remember that he was with a former Jedi Master, and we saw the same Jedi Master pulled a Jedi mind trick on 2 stormtroopers. It is very likely that Obi-Wan manipulated Luke into going with him. It's a perfectly legitimate possibility, and that is because you have a highly impressionable kid / teen who just saw his parents die, and so the only option was a guy who he just met and helped him out with droids and stuff like that. And so it's right with a situation like that. And so finally, and final point about the sons of pacing. The biggest criticism of The Last Jedi was its pacing. because within the first two acts, it would accelerate and decelerate at random because the biggest point was the biggest plot point was that Rey and Luke would be training at the same time Finn and Rose were at the cantina / casino, and that created a big problem because we saw the sun go up and down while Finn and Rose were doing their casino stuff, and so it could be chalked up to many different systems, but it's a problem in the pacing, which makes it the third worst movie. I'll let you go.
Okay, so a few points you brought. So first of all, if you said what made The Force Awakens good is that it brought back old characters and some story elements. That's par for the course. You know, everybody liked seeing Han Solo, everybody liked seeing Chewie and the Millennium Falcon and the jokes it made. But the biggest criticism, besides Rey's character, which most people thought was Mary Sue, was how similar it was to the New Hope, and just like extraordinarily so. A Force-sensitive person on a desert planet gets, you know, in league with Han Solo, and eventually they blow up a giant machine that, you know, kills stars. It destroys planets. You know, it's so similar, it's mind-boggling, right? You know, they blow it up, and that was the biggest criticism. And so for The Last Jedi to stray away from that, I think enriches the lore greatly. Next, you talk about the pacing. And the pacing is something I don't think really matters that much in a lore-related discussion. If you want to talk about which movie's better themselves, that's fair. But if you're talking about lore, you know, you can have the most terrible pacing in the world, but as long as you have enriched lore and you've enriched the overall saga and the story of the Star Wars universe, I think the pacing and how great of a, you know, movie-watching element that is rather irrelevant. And then we talk about Luke again and what was his actual motivation. So I'll quote Master Yoda, the one and only here from The Empire Strikes Back. Yoda says, "This one a long time have I watched. All his life he has looked away to the future, to the horizon. What he was doing? Adventure? Excitement? A Jedi craves not these things." So he says that Luke was dedicated and thinking about adventure and excitement. And he looked to his future and he looked to the horizon. That doesn't sound like somebody that's worried about social expectation. That worries about somebody that wants to have adventure and excitement and escape the norm of Tatooine and a farmer's life is what that speaks to me. And that's directly from Master Yoda. But even then, he talks all the time about, you can see his distaste and his displeasure in staying and working on Uncle Owen's farm on Tatooine and having to wait one more harvest. And so I think it's clear that he was doing that to escape Tatooine, so much so that even like Family Guy, when they mock it, talk about how much he wants to get off Tatooine because it's a generally understood thing. And I'll go into this point here. So you talk about Snoke, just another brief thing. So once again, like with the whole arc, and I think this talks about all of The Last Jedi, what they're setting up is something we haven't seen before, which is, I think it's going to be fantastic. With how Kylo Ren's going to get redeemed, Rey doesn't have that Master Yoda anymore. How's she going to advance in her skills in the Force? How's the Resistance going to build itself back up from going down to the 30 people that can fit on the Millennium Falcon? They're setting up plot points that have never been seen before in any Star Wars movie, and I can't wait until we see what happens in Episode 9 and the lore that's going to come from that because of the sticks that are used to build the fire from The Last Jedi. And with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, so the first thing you said was that the ending of Last Jedi was supposed to set up something that we have not seen before, but actually we have seen it before because if you remember the entire plot, the thing was that we have seen it before, but it was in what is now the non-canon Legends, because we have seen it because that was the entire plot of the Force Unleashed, where that plot was that you were supposed to be rescuing rebels. You were supposed to be rescuing rebels and helping out rebels, so that you could drum up resistance against the Empire, helping to build up resistance, building up an army that would strike down the Empire. And so it's literally no different than what's going on right now. Is that you have the same situation where you are people finding out what they're going, trying to find new allies, trying to find a whole new resistance to fight again the Empire, and it's doing the same thing over and over again. And so you have to point out that about Yoda training Luke, about Yoda training Luke, and the fact that he was rambunctious and all that. But the thing, but the thing, I think you're forgetting is that it was social norms because it was expected that he would go to the Imperial Academy because that's what most people he did his age was that they would go to the Imperial Academy after they could prepare the academy, but he was anxious to go for years, but his uncle and aunt kept him because they're more anticipation of going to Imperial Academy than it was about him wanting to leave Tatooine. But him leaving Tatooine and joining the rebellion, that fed into the more rambunctious, adventurous spirit that created the look that we all know and love. And so you brought up the point about the redemption of Kylo Ren, because as I've noted that it's not going to be all that different, because the only thing that's going to be different is that he's going to die, because Kylo Ren is just another Count Dooku. That's what he is. Kylo Ren is just another Count Dooku where he kills off his apprentice dog.
Okay, so first you talk about how the ending of The Last Jedi is very similar to The Force Awakens and Legends. So first of all, I don't really think Legends is fair to equate in a canonized discussion, because we could say that, The Force Awakens is, comparable to Legends because they, have children, and the children and the son of Han Solo turns evil, just like it happened with Jason Solo in the comics. But even if you want to equate it to The Force Awakens, it's remarkably different. The Force Unleashed. The Force Unleashed, the part you forgot to mention, is the entire thing starts out with Darth Vader finding a Force-sensitive child, training him as a secret apprentice to kill people, and there were rebel sympathizers, including General Rom Koda, and then eventually he turns to the light side and then helps build the resistance until he sacrifices himself. That's not going to happen. First of all, you don't have the same, because Kylo Ren didn't turn to the good side after he betrayed his master, right? He remained evil, the same point as Darth Vader. It's a very different plot point, once again, one we haven't seen before in a canonized universe. Two, you talk about social norms and how it's expected. We're getting off on a tangent here, but even then, if you just look at anything Luke says, in the novelization, if there's a bright center to this universe, you're on the world farthest from it. Believe me, Tatooine is a big hunk of nothing. He clearly hates Tatooine. You cannot put it all on a social norm even if you can't put it all on the social norm, first of all, but even then, Luke's clearly willing to help kill people because he wants to get off Tatooine, right? There's no way you can say that it's unreasonable for him to leave and go to this island because he believes a certain way and he wants to get away from things, when he's clearly willing to go join the Imperial Academy to get off Tatooine. Lastly, talk about Kylo Ren's redemption. He's going to die. Once again, I think this is very different, and especially considering it to Count Dooku. So first of all, Count Dooku is already an elderly Jedi master, right? Kylo Ren is still learning, and the Force is very unorthodox. Next, his redemption, once again, Count Dooku didn't have redemption. Count Dooku got decapitated. Kylo Ren, as far as we know, is now the leader of the First Order. Count Dooku was somebody that was a puppet for Darth Sidious, correct? And so when you look at Kylo Ren, he can't redeem himself by being the puppet and simply getting decapitated. He can't redeem himself by killing his master and turning to the good, because he's already killed his master and remained evil. So there's no real way for us to know, first of all, where they're going to go with this, but we know they have to do something to tie up his character arc and make it come full circle. And it's something we haven't seen before. Once again, saying that The Last Jedi enriches the lore. And now to go on the offensive here a bit, comparing it to other Star Wars movies, when you have crap like the Phantom Menace talking about metachlorians, and then you have Attack of the Clones saying sand is too sandy, I don't see how you can even equate The Last Jedi to those in a lore perspective.
No, you just fell into my trap because what is the title of the debate? Last Jedi lore-wise is the third worst Star Wars movie, and what did you bring up? That's the worst, and the second worst Star Wars movies. Because there's a reason why I said it's the third worst. Because Oh gosh, because everyone knows that Phantom Menace is atrocious. Everyone knows Attack of the Clones is atrocious. Everyone wants to forget that about the sand, about the midichlorians. That's the entire point, is to say that it's a third worst, not the worst, third worst. Because even compared to lore wise, compared to episode 3, it pales in comparison to episode 3. Lore wise compared to Empire Strikes Back, it pales in comparison. The New Hope, of course, it pales in comparison because it created the lore. But okay, and so you brought up the point that Count Dooku was not redeemed, but actually the thing is that he was pseudo redeemed in Attack of the Clones because because it's why I said that it's just another Count Dooku because what Kylo Ren because here's Count Dooku because Count Dooku, like Kylo Ren, he was basically doing his own thing because Count Dooku was doing one thing. Even though he was still under Palpatine, he was still operating his own mission, still plotting to overthrow his master. Same thing that the Kylo is doing, because it's what the Sith do. The Sith backstab each other, because we don't forget that Count Dooku, he was the one who warned the Jedi that a Sith Lord was in the Senate. He was the one who warned the Jedi that there's a massive evil within the Republic, because he basically had to warn the Jedi about Darth Sidious. So I also like to point out that let's just say saying that Snoke is probably still alive. Because everyone knows that everyone needs to kill him. So he's still lucky that he is still alive. He's still manipulating behind the scenes. Kylo Ren is still it's still falling for Snoke's plan. And so and finally about the whole Tatooine beaming thing. The biggest point is that he wanted to leave. He wanted to leave with the Imperials. That's the whole quote.
Okay. So to start, you say it's the third worst. So first of all, I would argue that The Force Awakens is far worse than The Last Jedi on a lore perspective. Even then, I wouldn't put it directly above it on a lore perspective. So you talk about Count Dooku was redeemed because he warned the Jedi there's a Sith Lord in the Senate. No, he actually said that to try and convince Obi-Wan to join the Separatist cause. In Attack of the Clones, while Obi-Wan's taking the chamber to try and get him to join him, when he's also talking about Qui-Gon Jinn. Continuing on, that Dooku was also not redeemed because he then went on to kill Jedi and have the whole separatist movement in the Clone Wars. He also was a very elderly, experienced Jedi that fell out of the Order after Qui-Gon Jinn died. It's nothing compared to Kylo Ren as a young child falling to darkness and killing his master but remaining evil. Then you say, well, Snoke is probably still alive, right? And I don't think that's fair to say for a few reasons. One, the next movie's not out. We don't know that. So it's theorized. We had a lot of theories about something like whose race parents were after episode 7. Those all turned out to be false for the most part. So I think it's hard to say that Snoke is still alive and use it as factual evidence. But even if he is, clearly Kylo Ren's the one calling the shots for now, because he's the one telling General Hux where to go and open fire, more, let's go get the base, things such as that. So even if Snoke is somehow still alive, Kylo Ren is still the figurehead leading the entire First Order for the time being. And once again, on Luke, I mean, we keep going back to this, but clearly, there's tons of evidence to show that his distaste for Tatooine is what fueled him to leave. If you look at his language, if you look at his attitude towards the planet, and even if you look at his novelization, he's upset that he had to withdraw his application, staring in disbelief because he didn't want to have to go deal with the Tusken Raiders anymore, Sand People as he calls them. So it's clearly more domestic reasons than some oppressive social expectation that everyone of that age has to go serve in the Imperial Academy, especially for a planet like Tatooine, where you have the scum and Mos Eisley and places such as that. They don't seem super imperialistic in support for the Empire. And so it's a little crazy. Maybe if this was someplace like Coruscant, or something such as that, that would make more sense. But overall, when you look at something like The Last Jedi compared to something like The Force Awakens played it safe, showed some characters, made some funny jokes, but over repeated story elements that we've seen before, and minimally advanced the lore, if any at all. Compare that to something like The Last Jedi that makes unexpected moves at every turn, that ultimately is leading to something greater that's probably, in my opinion, could possibly be the best Star Wars movie in Episode 9 with how unique and creative it's going to be.
Okay, so you made a couple of good points. I like a couple of you made that, but you made the point saying that Kylo Ren is now the figurehead of the New Order, but it's the same way how Count Dooku was also the figurehead for the CIS, for the CIS, and then it turns out that the Sith Lord is manipulating everything, because it probably is not. There's probably nothing there's probably nothing similar to how. There's nothing different to how Kylo Ren thinks that he has killed off Snoke. He thinks he killed off Snoke, and so he acts as the figurehead. He acts as the figurehead of the New Order, but in all likelihood, it turns out that Snook is playing both sides. It is orchestrating the events of both sides. Now, you said the point that the Force Awakens lore-wise is pretty weak. I would actually have to differ, because the Force Awakens is actually amazing lore-wise. Because even though it followed the template of A New Hope, it introduced a whole bunch of lore. It just vomited lore like nothing else. I mean, come on, just think about it. Think about that. You have the Republic. You had the Republic. They introduced the resistance about how you had these other factions that are disputing each other. In fact, that because you said that Last Jedi is better lore-wise. No, it's not. Because the fact is that Last Jedi is literally just feeding off of the lore that the Force Awakens provided. Because I ask you, what has The Last Jedi provided lore-wise that the Force Awakens didn't? Force Awakens showed off the New Order, the Resistance, the Republic. It introduced a whole swath of characters. It actually showcased new lightsabers. It showcased. It was the first one to showcase the new Star Destroyer. We saw anticipation of villains, though it did have the new Death Star. It still introduced lore, and thus it makes it the fourth best.
Okay, so a couple of points. Once again, Kylo Ren equals Count Dooku. You talk about how Snoke's alive, and so Kylo Ren's actually just the figurehead while there's a puppet master. We don't know that yet, so that's not a fair factual point to criticize, right? I mean, it's very hard to count that as evidence when we don't know. That's just a theory out there. I could have a theory that says, Rey is the adopted daughter of Master Yoda and his, loving Dagobah wife, and we can't use that as factual evidence. So that's completely subjective. And we'll talk about The Force Awakens for a minute and how it compares to Last Jedi. So The Force Awakens had a bunch of new shiny stuff because it's the first in a trilogy. That doesn't necessarily mean it made great lore decisions and enriched the lore, first of all. So when you have Force projection being showed in something like the end battle that isn't shown in The Force Awakens, and you have Supreme Leader Snoke connecting the minds of Rey and Kylo Ren, which is done brilliantly and filmed brilliantly. That's just not the same type of dramatic and lore-rich elements that you see inside The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens is a fun movie, but ultimately it falls flat. It has some elements in it that are somewhat important, but I wouldn't say they're rich for the lore. Like the Republic being destroyed is important, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is enriched in the lore, because boom, they're gone. Same with somebody like Snoke. You know, the Last Jedi with Snoke, he's barely shown in the movie. You know, he's just a hologram. There's significant elements missing, and they look like they're literally just there to fill the screen time of 2 hours, and they have no lasting impact. Starkiller Base did not have a lasting impact on the movie. You know, Han Solo, of course, dies, and that is somewhat significant. But besides that, there's no major lore-rich elements inside the movie because they don't show us connections to anything. Even if you think The Force Awakens is better, though, I would like to point you to the 10th Star Wars movie that is officially canon that nobody talks about. And that would be the 2008 Star Wars The Clone Wars movie, released in theaters all around the country, that has an 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is in the canon. It is a Star Wars movie. The resolution does not mention in any of the sagas, and so therefore it is fair for criticism, which we can all say is the worst Star Wars movie, and so therefore the burden falls to prove either The Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones is more rich in lore than The Last Jedi. And with that, I'll pass the mic back over.
I know I'm about to be blasted for what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. Lore-wise, The Phantom Menace is better than The Last Jedi. I said it. Phantom Menace as a movie is terrible. It is. Not debating it. It's a terrible movie. I hate it. But lore-wise, it fits in with the previous Legends verse beautifully because it references the entire Star Wars lore. If you pay attention to the cinema proceedings, if you pay attention to what's going on, it's amazing. Movie is terrible. Jar Jar, I hate it. All that statement because you said something up because you said that quality is not the quality of lore. Phantom Menace had great lore decisions. It set up the entire series brilliantly because it showed off, because it introduced every single major Star Wars character except Chewbacca. It did. I'm sorry. I hate the movie, but I said and so for
Yeah. So I guess we'll talk about the Phantom Menace versus the Last Jedi here for the last little bit. So you talk about the Phantom Menace is lore rich and the lore is amazing. So I'll bring up a few of the criticisms. First of all, most people think that Episode 1 shouldn't have started where the Phantom Menace was. Most people think that Episode 1 should have been where Episode 2 actually is because they think Episode 1 is rather insignificant in the lore itself. So once again, it gets the same, count that happens with The Force Awakens, where you're displaying factions because you're the first in the trilogy, and therefore setting up isn't necessarily enriching the lore in itself. That's something you have to do to have any movie, and therefore I don't think it's fair to criticize a sequel based on, obviously building from elements from a previous movie. But when you look at the criticism of the Phantom Menace, come on, like Metachlorians destroyed the lore, and we thought the lore was Darth Maul, like criminally unused badass, had 4 lines, then died, and then you don't see him again until a TV show because enough fanboys resurrected him. So, but in the moment of that movie, terrible decision. You have Naboo and, we have to stop the Trade Federation. They break free, and then, they're rather insignificant and barely seen until they're killed in Episode 3 and some minor discussion in 2 with Viceroy Gunray. The capturing of Naboo, the crisis, going to Coruscant, the political system, it's all a drag. It fills screen time. It shows some fairly interesting concepts, shows a little bit about the Republic, but overall, most of it is a complete wash. It not only destroys previous lore, like the whole aspect of the Force with metachlorians and how Force sensitives are selected and things such as that, but it also just is such a dull ride. Most of it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Like if you didn't see the invasion of Naboo and Episode 1 happened where Episode 2 was, and then there was a movie that showed the Clone Wars and then Revenge of the Sith, you'd have the same general concept as the lore was compared to having the Phantom Menace. Plus, let's not talk about the absolute drag in the middle where they get stuck on Tatooine and they barter with, Watto, and then Jar Jar steps in poop and gets his tongue shocked, and then there's a cool 10-minute pod race sequence that looks visually amazing, but watching somebody pod race is not enriching the lore. Sure, and it's displaying us Tatooine, which we're already familiar with from the original trilogy. And so therefore, I don't think it's even fair to equate the Phantom Menace to the Last Jedi that showed off, force projection and, this complex relationship between Rey, Kylo Ren, and Luke, and the unexpected death of Snoke, and the beautiful twin sunset that sends off Luke into becoming one with the Force, as well as seeing Master Yoda once again and discovering the ancient ways of the Jedi. And so for that reason, I don't think it's fair to say that The Last Jedi is worse than the lore than Star Wars, the Clone Wars movie, Attack of the Clones, and the Phantom Jar Jar